Well, hello, Brian Goulet here of GouletPens.com for the 64th episode of Goulet Q&A. It is January 30th of 2015. I now understand what year it is. I had trouble transitioning over into 2015. Time goes by so quickly now. And, I've got my mic cord wrapped around my foot. I did remember to plug my mic in this week. Last week, if you noticed, the audio was a little off. It's because I was wearing the mic, but I forgot to plug it into the camera. You would think that I would have this stuff figured out by this point, but that's how it goes. So I'm going to kind of catch you up to speed on some things. If you remember watching last week's video, I actually kind of pre-recorded that one a week ahead of time because I was going to be out of town. So I can talk a little bit about what I did while I was out of town and also kind of catch you up on some current events in the Goulet life. If you don't really like this, you can skip ahead further into the video, give you time markers with all the questions. So if you don't really like the banter, that's okay. I mean, this whole video is kind of bantering, kind of wandering around anyway, but it'll take me a little bit to get to the questions because I got a little bit to catch you up on. So just on the personal side of things, I now have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. My daughter had her birthday right before Christmas, and my son just turned 5 last weekend. So that was pretty crazy. Both my kids are out of diapers now, so the diaper phase is over. All of the baby gates are taken out of the house, so it's kind of like we have like a normal house again. I mean, there's definitely like kids' toys and stuff everywhere. It's crazy. But, we're just kind of realizing like that phase is kind of done for us. So that's really just crazy because, we had 2 kids in diapers for over a year, so it was just diapers everywhere. And then now they've just kind of, boom, transitioned out and just kind of realized how quickly time goes by. So any of you parents out there, you can totally relate. But it was cool. My son is really into Legos and is into Ninja Turtles for some reason. I didn't even push that on him. He learned that at preschool. So we had a Ninja Turtle Lego party for his birthday. It was kind of random, but you can't find Lego birthday decorations anywhere. I mean, they just don't make them. And I would have thought with a Lego movie and everything, you could get like Lego anything. And Joseph definitely has a bunch of Lego stuff, don't get me wrong, but they didn't have any Lego party decorations. So it was a Ninja Turtle theme party, but then pretty much all he got was Legos because he's obsessed with Legos. And I am totally on board with that. I am like pushing Legos on him hard because I loved Legos and Connects and stuff like that as a kid. I'm very hands-on, and he is as well. And that's just like super fulfilling for me as a dad to just like, we have like a nightly routine now. We have dinner, and then him and I kind of like make our Legos together while Ellie just kind of runs around in circles all night. So that's kind of our little routine. So that's super cool just to get to spend that bonding time. So really enjoying this phase of life. Anyway, that's kind of on the personal side of thing. And then, basically last week, the reason that I wasn't able to shoot the video as normal is because I was actually out of town. I was in Nashville, Tennessee. We're in Virginia, so Nashville is it would be about a 9-hour drive. We ended up flying. But I took my whole leadership team to Dave Ramsey's EntreLeadership Performance Series conference. It's like a 3-day event that they have on their campus in Nashville. So we got to see Dave Ramsey's building, got a tour of his offices and stuff like that. Very cool. They have a cool culture there. I am not totally drinking the Kool-Aid on everything they do, but they definitely have a lot of really good examples of what it means to run an awesome company. So I got some great ideas there, and I took my whole leadership team, all my managers that we have here at Goulet, just basically because, we're all kind of young and inexperienced here in general in this company. And so it's nice to be able to learn from some people that have done some stuff and learn some hard knocks themselves so that we don't have to make at least every mistake ourselves before we learn from it. There's a really good quote that I have from, let's see here, who is it? From Earl Wilson that says, "Experience enables you to recognize a mistake when you make it again." And I just love that quote. Anyway, so it was really cool. So we went there. It was a 3-day thing. So it was like Monday through Wednesday last week. Flew back like late Wednesday night and then came in to work on Thursday morning. Probably should have taken a day off just to kind of like process everything that happened because it was pretty intense. If you've ever read the book EntreLeadership, it was basically a lot of what's in that book minus some of the accounting and finance stuff. And all that stuff packed into 3 solid days of seminar, teaching, Q&As, that kind of stuff. So it was really good, really packed. We got a lot of validation that we're doing a lot of things right, but then at the same time, we got a lot of great ideas for things that we could do even better. So if you like the way that we do things here at Goulet, Look for more great stuff. One thing I will say is it's been really kind of a challenge for me and Rachel especially to take our business the way that we started it 5 years ago, and with just the two of us, and grow it to now we're going to have 30 people here pretty soon at our company, and that's pretty intense. We hired our first team member besides me and Rachel just over 3.5 years ago. So to go from 2 people to almost 30 in 3.5 years is pretty intense. And to do that while still keeping the kind of personal feel, the mom and pop thing, of course it's not going to be exactly the same. I used to answer every email and used to pack every order. That definitely doesn't happen these days. But we want to keep that same spirit alive and keep that same kind of personal touch even as we grow. So it's very intentional. I spend a lot of my time kind of behind the scenes actually doing that stuff to coach and train other people to do things where normally I would have done it in the past. So that's a huge effort. 2015 will be all about training up other leaders, delegating like crazy around Goulet, because honestly, Rachel and I are just both spread so thin that we're starting to drop the ball in some places. And I'll be the first to admit that we are starting to see some cracks in the dam, if you will, because we're holding on to too much. And so we're going to try to train and delegate away as much as possible. And if you're not really into businessy kind of stuff, this probably is kind of boring for you and you don't really care about this. But for any of you who've ever been in type of like a leadership management type situation, or you run your own company, the challenges that I'm facing right now, and it's a big one. So I really believe in what we're doing, and I want to really try to keep that same tight kind of feel, great product expertise, product knowledge, personal interaction that we have, but do that essentially at scale, which is really tough to do. And everything that I'm focused on right now is kind of balancing out like this kind of direct interaction that I have, doing the Q&As and the shooting the videos and stuff like that, balancing that out with supporting my team, who also needs a lot of guidance, a lot of direction, training, stuff like that. So that's the world I'm in right now. So if I talk about this kind of stuff more, that's because I'm spending like 95% of my time actually doing that stuff. And I'm spending a lot less time physically playing with pens. And that's just kind of the reality of where I am right now, at least at this kind of moment in time. I am planning to kind of get more into the pen stuff, but I have to really intentionally structure that into my day. But anyway, that's where I'm at right now. It's just kind of where I am. To kind of catch you up on what we have going on in the company here, we've got some new hires. We've got on our fulfillment team, we've got Sam and Brandon who joined us. Their bios should be up on the site here pretty soon. We also have Zippy and Cindy who are joining our customer care side of things. We've actually kind of done an intentional split. I think I mentioned this either last week or the week before, how our customer care has been kind of everything customer related, and we're kind of splitting that now. So we're going to have customer care in the traditional way that we have had it. We're going to be answering phones, emails, that kind of stuff, helping with a lot of product knowledge, and then we're actually going to have an order processing team. So separating out a little bit of the kind of credit card processing and charging credit cards, and actually helping to move your order through kind of the process there, versus more the traditional kind of customer service where we're answering phones and emails and questions and stuff like that related to products, and kind of more the helping side of things there, as opposed to making sure that your product actually moves through the building. So that's, we've gotten to the point where splitting that off kind of makes sense. Both roles are kind of robust enough to do that. So we've been doing a lot of restructuring, reorganizing inside the company. This happens a lot. Every 3 months or so we go through periods where it's like, geez, is the way that we've been doing it still working now? And we start to restructure some things. And, it's been working okay so far. So that's what we're working through with customer care right now. And then also, we're actually still looking for, we got some good potential applicants for our inventory control analyst. This is essentially somebody who looks at numbers all day and helps place our purchase orders, helps to manage our stock inventory levels, because if you've ever been in the retail business, you know that you will sink or swim by how well you manage your inventory in terms of cash flow and sales and stuff like that. So it's a very important part of what goes on behind the scenes here, but we got some good potentials there. That's really kind of Rachel's wheelhouse. She's heading that up. She loves Excel, all kinds of macros and stuff like that to help manage that. So that's kind of cool. So it's there's a lot going on. I could go into all detail all day long talking about how we kind of do internal stuff here, but I realize that's only kind of an interest to a segment of people that watch the Q&A. So I will not talk too much more about that at all. I got a lot of good pen questions, so now we'll get into it. So hopefully, what I've done 10 minutes or so far. So even more than that. Yeah, about 10 minutes. Okay, so that's not too bad. So we'll talk about some personal stuff for 10 minutes and then we'll get into the questions. So I got a bunch of them lined up. I think I've got 14 or 16 questions lined up. I probably won't get to them all, but I got them mapped out pretty good. So let's go ahead and get at it. Okay, so Neville Smith on the blog said, "Hey Brian, love your work. I've scoured the internet and cannot find a definitive answer. Where is the best place for a wax seal? At the bottom of the letter, fold the letter and seal it on the fold, or seal it on the back of the envelope? What is the protocol? Love to hear your opinion on Q&A. Cheers." Well, cheers, Neville. I think the reason that you're not able to find a definitive answer is because there isn't one. Honestly, it's kind of whatever you feel like doing. You could do all three if you really want to go nuts with your wax seals. You know, I think the thing is, and I'm actually really excited about this question, and I put it as the first question that I answer because I never get questions about wax seals. I've got like 10 wax seal videos on my website that I did in like the first 2 months that I started this company. I got all excited about wax seals and shot the videos, and then I was like, well, I've pretty much answered everything I know about wax seals, and I never made any more videos on them. But anyway, so J.R. Bond has some good supple wax seal. That's what I've been selling for 5 years. I really love it. It's a great product, and it holds up really well. So essentially these days, you pretty much want to use supple wax. This isn't really answering your question, but just give you a broad wax sealing thing because I never talk about it. You want supple wax because in the modern mailing system, there's a lot of automated sorting machines and stuff like that. And if you use the traditional brittle wax or King's wax, it's going to just break apart and just not even just crack, but literally get obliterated and disappear off of whatever you do. Like I've literally gotten letters from people before where they have, you know, sealed up a letter, done a seal with brittle wax on it, put it inside an envelope, which is even more protected, and it comes to me and it's literally just like dust, like inside the envelope, and I look at a smudge on the paper and I'm like, well, that's where a wax seal used to be. So you've got to use supple wax if you're actually mailing your letter through the mail system. So now that I've gotten that out of the way, to give you a little bit of context about wax seals, the reason that they used to use wax seals like way back in the day when they had to hand deliver letters and they had no courier service, if you will, it was for essentially security purposes. So you had your individually made wax seal as a lord or a lady or whatever, you know, religious figure of some kind. You would have your wax seal that would be unique to you, and you would use that to actually seal up your letter, whether it was in an envelope or it might have been just the paper was folded in such a way that you would seal it up, and it would actually physically be closed with your brittle wax seal, and then it would get hand delivered to whoever the intended recipient was. And the intended recipient would know, having a perfectly intact, untouched wax seal, that no one had opened up and read that letter in transit on the way to you. So whoever sealed it up, no one had viewed it before it got to you. If that thing was cracked or opened up in any way, you would know because you wouldn't be able to reseal it back. Even if you tried to like remelt it down or whatever, you wouldn't have that, you know, ring seal or whatever wax seal that somebody had done, because they were very intricate and kind of complicated to do. So, I mean, I'm sure you could have forgery and stuff like that. I'm sure that kind of stuff went on way back in the day. But that was the idea, is you know, a regular just passerby or whoever was delivering the letter or whatever couldn't just open it up and peek and look at the information. Because, you know, back in the day, it might take, you know, a week or 2 weeks to deliver a letter for a distance, and you know, there would be critical information in that letter. It wasn't just like sending an email today. It was like there was some legit stuff that would have to be transferred by letter. Transferred? Transported? Whatever. You get what I mean? This was like legit information, so they wanted to seal it up. That was the original intention of the wax seal. Nowadays, it's really just purely aesthetic. It's just for nostalgia or for the design kind of impression that you have with your letter. So that's why you don't see any standards for it anymore, is because there really isn't a purpose for it other than just making it look nice. And when you make it look nice, you could put it wherever you want, and its function is just to look cool. So that's really about it. So personally, I've done it basically all ways. When I've mailed letters, I've done it on the outside sometimes. I mean, honestly, I seal up the envelope and then I do a wax seal on it. It's completely redundant, doesn't even need to be there, but it's just for the impression. I've definitely done it sometimes where I've done it on the letter, like I'll sign my name and the ink that I'm using or the pen or whatever, and then I'll do a wax seal kind of next to it, purely aesthetic at the bottom of the letter. And then I'll fold it up and then put it in an envelope and then seal the envelope too. It's just purely for an impression. That's about it. So Hopefully that answers your question, but the bottom line answer is you can do whatever you want. There's not a lot of rules. All right, Lori Wood 01 on YouTube said, "Hey Brian, I recently bought a Rhodia number 16 top wirebound dot pad from you." I think I've actually got one. No, I got a ruled one there. I don't have one on hand. Should have thought of that. For some reason, I was thinking the dots were gray in color. Was I mistaken, or is it different for the non-wirebound dot pads? I'm really glad you asked this question. I have a bit of a story to tell with this one. It's actually different, yes. So the top wirebound dot pads, the dots are fat and purple, as opposed to on the top staple-bound dot pads, they are small and gray. Now, here is the deal. So there's a bit of a story. When these top wirebound dot pads came out 2.5 years ago or so, they had these kind of fat purple dots, and I didn't really notice it when they came in because I had kind of assumed they would be the tight gray dots like the normal dot pads had. The top staple-bound dot pads have always had those small gray dots. It was always that way. So when these ones came out, it actually took me a little bit, a month or so, to really notice, like, hey, these dots are different, you know, because it's just not something I would normally inspect at that time. Now I know to look out for that. So what happened was, you know, I reached back out to Exoclair, who is the distributor for Rhodia in the US, and I said, hey, you know, these dots are different. Is it supposed to be this way, or you know, what's going on here? And they took a little bit of time, got back to me and said, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. These are supposed to be different. These are supposed to be the same dots that are on the top staple bound. These are wrong. And so we're going to discontinue them and not sell them anymore and go back and fix it. We got to put it on. It has something to do with which machine it was being run on and so on. I don't really know. I don't know how Rhodia does their stuff, believe it or not. So they pulled them all off, and I was like, okay, well, you know, it'll take what, a month to a couple months to fix this, whatever, just kind of keep in touch with me. And so I said at that time, like, hey, these are going to be gone, they're coming back, we don't really know when, just kind of hang out and we'll wait. And we waited and we waited and we waited and we waited, and about 2 years goes by. So this was now like the end of 2014. I emailed them again. I was like, look, you know, I'm just kind of checking in again. I would check in every couple of months, be like, hey, are these coming, or what's going on? Because people are asking and whatever. You know, eventually got to the point where they've been gone. They were only around for a month or two. Then they got pulled, and then, but I think enough of them had been around where people would just kind of ask regularly for them. So I had asked Exoclair, and I was like, hey, when are these things coming back? It's kind of been a while. And they finally emailed me back towards the end of 2014 and said, hey, these are coming back, you know, we fixed them, whatever, they're coming. And I was like, sweet, great, fantastic, I'm excited about it. We get them in, like the first thing I do is I check them, and I'm like, these dots look the same as they did before. It's the fat purple dots. And I was like, what is going on here? So I was like, maybe they had some like sitting in their warehouse and the wrong shipment got sent to us or something. I was like, I don't know what in the world could be going on where these things, they would have taken it off for 2 years and then brought it back and have it be exactly the same. I was like, this is really strange. So I contacted Exoclair again. I was like, so are they supposed to be this way? And they were like, oh my gosh, no, they're not supposed to be that way. They're supposed to be fixed. I got to find out what's going on. And so I'm actually still kind of waiting to hear back. So the situation is now like they're supposed to be different. They're supposed to be the same as what's on the top staple bound. However, you know, we didn't get a lot of complaints about them before. It was just kind of like, hey, this is different. You know, I would rather have the small gray dots, but I like the format. You know, purple dots is better than no dots, right? So we're in the situation now. It's like, okay, so they're supposed to be different, but we have the ones with the purple dots. That's what's coming. So we either pull them and have nothing, or we just kind of wait for them to fix it and then just change it over when they fix it, which they already have pulled them off once for 2 years. And so, you know, and this, honestly, this is not meant to be like a complaint towards Rhodia or anything. I have no idea the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. I've seen enough crazy, like, things like this happen over the years with pens or paper, ink, whatever, where I really don't judge. I know that it's so complicated to manufacture just about anything that I really don't, I'm not going to complain. It's just, you know, letting you know, like, their intention was to make the dots small gray dots like the other dot pads, but what we're seeing is the fat purple ones. So we're going to continue to sell fat purple ones until they change them over. So, or until they discontinue them again, if they would, I don't know. So that's kind of where we are with that. So I've tried to photograph it. Maybe I could update the product description or something to explain some of what I'm talking about here. But that's just the honest to goodness situation. We're trying to figure out exactly what happened. But I can tell you right now, based on previous experience, it's going to take a long time just to figure out exactly what's going on, because I've noticed that things in the paper world tend to move at a snail's pace. Like any changes, new product development, whatever, things just take a really long time. So it's just, we're going to have to wait. But in the meantime, at least we have the ones with the fat purple dots. So I won't complain. Next question, Louis I on Facebook says, what's a good ratio of water dilution to ink to reduce the feathering of Baystate Blue? Well, I'll talk about Baystate Blue, but really this is kind of true for just about any ink, so I'll just broaden that up a little bit. You know, in general, you can sometimes dilute the ink with water to reduce feathering. Baystate Blue is formulated a little bit different than some other inks, and I honestly don't know everything that goes into it to even tell you exactly why it's different. I know it's a higher pH than most other inks. Excuse me, that's about all I know from a chemical perspective about what makes Baystate Blue different. It's not mixable with other inks except for the other two Baystate inks. So it's just a little different kind of ink. But in general, when you're talking about diluting ink, you can dilute it about 10% before you'd really start to notice any difference in color. That might vary depending on how saturated the ink is with dye. The more saturated the color is, the more you could dilute it without noticing a difference necessarily. But in general, about 10% dilution will help some of those, you know, qualities without sacrificing the color. You go more than 10%, you're going to start to run into a more of a watery looking ink, as you would expect, because you're adding water to it. I would use distilled water. You know, you can use tap water if you have no other choice. It's just, you know, realize that whatever minerals or deposits that you have in your water would then be in your ink, and it might affect that quality of that ink over the long haul in terms of like stuff that could grow in it, or, you know, just whatever mineral deposits that could end up in your pen. In that small amount of ink, you know, it's probably not going to make too huge of a difference. You're talking about, you know, a $12, $50, $13 bottle of ink. It's not going to be the end of the world if you dilute it with a little bit of tap water. But the correct thing to say is to use distilled water, because you don't have mineral deposits in that water. So that's what I'll say. But then, let's see here, where was I? In general, you could go to about a 25% dilution, and that you would start to see a little bit of color difference, but it wouldn't be super drastic. You go more than that, and you're going to really start to notice a difference, and it's going to really start to change the properties of the ink as well. Depending on the ink, so basically what happens is the more saturated the ink is, the more dye is in the ink. Dye is drier than water. So ink is basically made of dye, water, and some other things like biocides and stuff like that. But in general, the more water you add, the drier it tends to make it. Now, what's interesting about that is, you know, you think like, okay, dye is really dry, so why is adding water to it making it drier? Well, to counteract the dye that's put in there that's very dry, they add lubricants, okay, in general. So the more lubricant you add, the more likely you are to have things like feathering and extended dry time and nib creep and stuff like that, where the ink comes up onto the nib. And so when you have a very heavily saturated ink color, Baystate Blue is fairly saturated, and a lot of Noodler's inks, a lot of Private Reserve, Diamine, Diatramentis, those things. A lot of them are very saturated, so they tend to have more lubricants in them. So they'll flow very nicely with the lubricants, but if it flows too much and has too much feathering and stuff like that, if you add water to it, you're diluting the dye a little bit, but you're also diluting the lubricant. So you're actually going to be cutting down some of that lubricant and making the water a little bit drier. So that's kind of an interesting little thing. You might not have quite the same drastic effect if you're using a more or a less saturated ink, such as like J. Herbin or Lamy, or, you know, some of the, basically any of the inks that are made by the actual pen companies, they tend to have less saturated inks, just in general. So the last thing I'm going to say about that is I would tend to mix it in small batches. You don't want to take your, you know, 3-ounce bottle of Noodler's and just start dumping water in it, because if you screw something up or you don't like the dilution, you've ruined an entire bottle of ink. So I would start with a small like sample vial, you know, like the normal, you know, this kind of sample vial, and go like maybe 2, 3, 5 milliliters, whatever you want. You can't go too small because then it's really hard to, how do you do 10% of 1 milliliter? That's like a few drops of water. You could try that, but it's not going to be as exact. The larger the sample you use, the more precise you can get with your measurement. So I would go maybe a few milliliters, like 2 to 5, somewhere around there, and you should be pretty good. All right, David on the blog had a question about Lamy 2000. So I have a few piston fillers, Lamy 2000, or piston filler pen, Lamy 2000, and I like changing inks often. Does it hurt my pen to fill a little bit of ink, then just finish the process by sucking air? Okay, so basically when you have a piston filling pen, such as the Lamy 2000, like he's talking about, do I have one handy? Let's see if I do. Give me a second. Okay, I do have a Lamy 2000 right here. So if you have a Lamy 2000, when you fill this pen, there's a couple different ways you could do it. If you know you want to just get a little bit of ink in there, you could just not unscrew the piston all the way. You could just unscrew the piston a little bit, dip it in, and then unscrew it just a tad, and it'll be closed up there. You'll get a little bit of ink in your pen and you can go. But I think what you're talking about here, David, is if you unscrew the thing all the way, so the piston's all the way down, the piston filler knob is all the way extended, and you only fill a little bit of ink and you stop, you can't just leave it chilling there because you've got this kind of exposed, you know, piston knob. If you're using a cartridge converter pen, it is not the same way. And I'm like searching around now to see if I have one. That one's inked up. I don't want to use that. Let's see, piston filler, okay. So I have a Lamy, oh, dang it, I don't have a converter in there. Sorry, should have planned this out better. Let's see here, Pilot. Okay, I've got a Pilot Falcon right here. So this is a cartridge converter pen. Whereas when you have a cartridge converter, you know, I could screw the piston all the way down and I can put this in the ink and I can put just a little bit of ink in there and stop, and then just recap it and not a big deal. I don't have to go all the way because I don't have a filler knob or anything to worry about. But when you have a piston filling pen, like the Lamy 2000, then if you can't stop part way because this filler knob is just gonna be hanging out there, and then when you go to post it, it's gonna be slipping and sliding all over it. You gotta have the thing completely cinched all the way down when you go to use it. So that's kind of setting up my answer to the question, which is basically, you don't have to worry about it. If you fill it part way and then, you know, just suck in air the rest of the way, it doesn't hurt anything at all. It might get you some bubbles in the pen, which will eventually kind of settle out. And depending on the type of ink, some inks get a little more bubbly than others. You could end up with kind of a break in the flow sometimes, but even that's not really all that much a concern. But that's essentially the only thing that you're going to deal with. One thing that you could do to help combat with that is, you know, if you are filling it, and you fill it part way, you pull it out, you could wipe off the nib and everything, and then you flip it upside down like this, and then finish your knob the rest of the way. Then your ink is going to be settling down to the bottom, and you're not going to be like bubbling it up. If you have it like this and you're sucking it up this way, the ink is hanging out down here, and as you're sucking air through, you know, with the rest of your filling cycle there, if you will, it's going to be creating a lot of bubbles in there, and you maybe don't want that. So just flip it upside down as you finish your filling cycle. The ink is going to drop down. It's not going to bubble up quite as much, but it doesn't hurt the pen or anything. The bubbling doesn't do anything. So you can, you know, you can just suck away, if you will. I wrote that in my notes. Doesn't hurt a thing, suck away. So it probably sounds weird, but I've been doing this for years, especially piston fillers. Doesn't hurt anything. You know, you can do it to your heart's content. The one thing I will say is over the years, as I've been using pens more, I change inks in my piston fillers just a lot less. Part of the main advantage of piston fillers is that you get to have a higher ink capacity on these pens in general than you do on a cartridge converter. So they are really more conducive to using one ink more continuously and not changing it all the time. It's kind of a pain to clean out piston fillers more so than a cartridge converter. The nice thing about a cartridge converter is you can fill it just a little bit, use it to your heart's content, and then when it comes time to clean it, what I do is I take the converter off, just clean that out, shake it out on its own, and then I use a bulb syringe like I've got here, and then I don't have a nib in the bulb syringe, this is my Edison bulb filler from April Fool's several years ago, but I take this and I just blast all the ink through here. I do never use a cartridge converter to actually clean out my pen unless I absolutely don't have a bulb syringe anywhere, which is rare because I keep them basically everywhere I go. So that's why I love cartridge converters for changing out inks constantly. In general, I don't really do that with my piston pens. Even my Pilot Custom 74, which has that Con 70 converter, that converter is kind of a pain to clean out. So I tend to change inks a lot less in that pen even. So that would be my recommendation, is maybe consider, if you love to change out colors a lot, find a good cartridge converter pen that you like to use, and then you won't have to deal with it quite as much. But you can certainly do whatever you want in that respect. Won't hurt a darn thing. Stephanie P. on Facebook. My husband and I each got a Monteverde pen for Christmas this year. He got an Invincia and I got an Intima. We have both had a lot of issues with skipping, starting, and even some railroading while using the pens with Monteverde inks. Slowly we've tried some other inks as well, but seem to be having similar problems. Is this a common problem with Monteverde nibs or inks? Could it be that we missed something when we cleaned the pen? Tuning issue? We really want to love these pens. Help. Okay, so, well, this is, this is kind of a tough question for me to take. In general, I don't like to take like specific troubleshooting questions sometimes because there's so many factors that could be going on here. It's kind of tough for me to diagnose, but I did want to talk about it a little bit because it kind of hits on a little bit broader subject of the Monteverde pens. Sometimes their nibs can be a little tight, and what I mean by that is the nib tines can be really kind of pressed tightly together, which can restrict some of the flow and cause some issues with skipping and stuff like that. It can make it more sensitive to the rotation in your hand because it's not flowing quite as wet as it normally might. And so I have had some people comment before about Monteverde pens being a little dry. So that's kind of, I think, what's going on here is, you've got two different pens, they're both having kind of the same issue, and I think, I've had some other people give that same kind of feedback. I've witnessed it myself with my pens. So it is something that I can discuss here. So cleaning out the pen definitely is a good thing. Actually, we had Donna on Facebook kind of answer your question a little bit, had a similar situation. I like the answer that Donna gave. I don't have it posted here, but I can summarize it. Basically said that she had pulled the nib out, kind of cleaned it, and then reinstalled it, but not quite as deep into the pen, and it fixed every issue. So that is certainly something. You can pull the nib and the feed out of that pen. Sometimes it can be a little tight, so you may want to be careful about that. Check out my Goulet grip video, shows you how to kind of pull nibs out. That's really good. I also have a video on removing the Monteverde nibs. I think I do it out of an Invincia, so that's another thing that you can check there. But you can pull that out. Sometimes that will help, but another thing that you can do is actually you can flex the tines a little bit. Do I have a Monteverde handy? You may notice I have a little more pen tray thing going on here, which I'm not going to go into full detail now, but maybe if you ask it in the next Q&A, I could talk more about it. But anyway, so I don't have a Monteverde handy, but basically, I'll use this because I have the nib. So if you have a nib, if you want to increase your ink flow, I really need to do a video specifically on this because I keep mentioning it in side conversations left and right. But to increase your ink flow, you gently press down and intentionally kind of flex out the tines a little bit. This is really funny that I'm using this object to represent this, but let me grab another pen. All right, so I've got a Lamy here. So if you want to intentionally flex out the nib, you don't go crazy, just go really lightly and very short strokes, just kind of flex it out, just as if you're trying to get a little bit of line variation. Oh, got some ink on my finger. Great. Smear that around, soak it in good. I feel like I'm like not normal unless I have ink all over my hands. It's very weird. That's the life I lead. But anyway, so you flex out just a little bit there and then try writing with it normally. Flex out just a little bit more, write normally until it's writing like you feel it should. You definitely can overdo that, so I wouldn't go completely nuts and be very intentional about what you're doing, but that is essentially how you increase ink flow. And then to decrease ink flow is much more difficult, but that's a whole other thing. I won't get into that. But worst case, if you got the pen from us, you didn't say specifically whether you did or not, and that's okay. But if you did, shoot us an email, info@gouletpens.com, and we're happy to help you troubleshoot that further with more specific kind of follow-up information, or we can exchange the pen if it's just not working out for you. We want you to be happy with it, so we could take a look at it, let you know our thoughts. But in general, those Monteverde nibs tend to be a little tight, so you can smooth them out. You can increase the flow a little bit if you need to. All right, I am really taking my time on these questions, aren't I? All right, that's okay. Still getting back in the groove of things. Jeff M on Facebook said, I've been watching many of your old videos and many of Nathan Tardif's as well. Can you tell me about pens that come with the 4.5 ounce bottles? I don't want any more preppies, but I saw some others in Baystate Blue, Nikita Red, and a very current vid that shows one he called the Charlie, included with his Heart of Darkness. I'm putting together an order and might be including these inks along with an Ahab and maybe a Conrad with a Pilot Metropolitan and a Lamy Safari. All right, Jeff, you're getting all set up here, man. That's great. Okay, so it has been a little confusing with some of the Noodler's pens. So Nathan includes a 4.5, in some of his 4.5 ounce inks, he includes a free pen. And literally it's a free pen. It's the same cost as the ink would be without a pen. So he doesn't like mark up the cost of it and include a pen. It's literally, you know, like if you look at some inks like Noodler's Black, that does not come with a free pen, but you know, other ones might. So first off, I'm going to address Baystate Blue. I'm just going to be doodling with this thing the whole time. I'm really like, I'm very, I gesticulate when I talk. I use my hands a lot, for if you're not familiar with that word. I'm just like fiddling and doodling all the time. Anyway, so Baystate Blue is, it used to come with, okay, it comes with a Platinum Preppy that is unmarked, eyedropper converted, with a rollerball tip that you can swap out with the fountain pen tip. That's what it comes with now. It used to also come out with a Kuretake brush pen. It no longer comes with that brushed pen because the price of those pens went through the roof, and Nathan just said, I can't do this anymore, so I'm just not going to carry the brush pen anymore. The price of the bottle of ink didn't change at all. It was a free pen that is now no longer included, so you're no longer getting a brush pen with it. Sorry about that. It was just a cost thing. Nikita Red. So Nikita, a number of years ago, Nathan started including an eyedropper, a Noodler's eyedropper pen that was different than any of the other Noodler's pens. And I actually need to check and make sure if that thing is still going on. It's been kind of touch and go. And let me see if what we still have on our site, whether it's still got. Okay, so it's still coming with that Noodler's eyedropper pen. He started including it in some of his other pens and then kind of took them away, and he's been kind of experimenting with that. I think he is not going to have an infinite supply of that kind of older style Noodler's eyedropper pen. So I think the Charlie pen that he has, he just did a video on the Charlie pen for Heart of Darkness. I think what it's intended to possibly be, if it's well accepted, is a replacement for that other Noodler's pen and possibly the Preppy in the future. I don't know. I'm kind of speculating a little bit here, so don't hold me to any of this, but I believe that's what's going on. I know the Charlie pen is kind of it's a limited thing. We have very few of them, and we just got a shipment the other day, and by the time this video posts, they're probably going to be gone. But let me just do a search real quick. See if I still have it in stock even as of this. I'm shooting this right now it's 11:34 on Thursday morning. That's what I'm doing right now. So let me search for it real quick. Sorry I didn't have this prepped ahead of time. Life's been crazy for me, so I'm kind of winging it a little bit here. But in general, the Noodler's Heart of Darkness comes with an eyedropper converted Preppy. And we're out of the Charlie pen. So, okay, it's gone at this point. I don't know if we're going to get more. We had a limited batch. I know some of you are going to be frustrated because you might have wanted this pen and you're like, what the heck, why didn't I know about it? It's because we had so few of them. If we had made it a big deal that we were getting them, it would have just created a whole lot of frustration for everybody because they would have been gone in a second and then you wouldn't have gotten one anyway. So I'm sorry about that. We had just very, very few of them. So if it ends up being more of a thing, if the Charlie pen ends up sticking around a little bit, maybe I'll show it to you a little bit more and talk about it more, but you know, I kind of don't want to just like tease you and show you this thing that's not going to be around long if it ends up not being around long, because that would just be mean. But you know, I will talk about that more if there is more to talk about. But look at gouletpens.com. The pens that we either say or show under those products, that is what is actually coming on it. We work really hard to make sure that that stays up to date. Sometimes we miss the mark a little bit because Nathan might change things on us and not tell us. That happens. But in general, if we find out about something that's any different, we'll change it on our site as soon as we possibly can to be as up to date as possible. I'm going to take a little bit of little bit of water break here, so, you know, contemplate the origin of the universe while I take a sip of water. Ooh, that's good and cold too. Yeah. I have this nice thermos here, this thermos brand water bottle that keeps water really cold. So I fill it with ice every morning, and then I just refill it with water all day, and I got like ice water all day. It's very cool. Kenneth M. on Facebook asked me, is there an easy way to clean the feeder tube in my Noodler's Ahab fountain pen? It suffers from staining from my black or blue-black inks. Just now I'm using some fine copper wire to basically scour the inside of it clean, but is there an easier way? Great Q&A shows you have. I watch them every Friday night as I clean out my pens from last week. Keep up the good work. That's really cool, Kenneth. I've heard some cool stuff about, like, you know, people's routines that they have with watching Q&A, and it's just really, it's really cool to me that I'm like worked into your routine. That's, you know, makes me really want to make sure that I get these things turned out every week, because I don't want to like disrupt your life, you know what I mean? Anyway, so thank you, that's really cool. Thanks for inviting me into your pen cleaning routine. So the Noodler's Ahab, it has a filler breather tube, if you will. A filler, it's really a filler tube, but it's called a breather tube, and I'm trying to see if I have one. Open up my little pen thing again. I haven't put all my pens in here yet, so I don't necessarily have an Ahab like at the ready. Which again, if I had prepped ahead of time, I could have maybe thought about that, but dang it, I don't have an Ahab handy. So, wait, maybe I do. Yes, I do, but it's inky. So I don't know if I can actually even show you the breather tube, but basically, here's what's going on with the breather tube. Maybe if I do it this way, okay. See if I spill ink all over myself. So the breather tube is this little guy inside. If you remove the piston, you see it's got a little tube in there, right there. That's what you're talking about. This tiny, thin little tube, and it's, it can actually be removed. You can just pull that thing right out of there. So that, if you haven't discovered that already, I'm sure you have, but for those of you that maybe aren't as familiar with this pen, that breather tube just pulls right out. You really don't even need it. You can, it allows you to fill a little bit more in the pen, because it allows you to fill ink up into the piston rod there, because that piston rod is hollow. So it gets you an extra 0.2 milliliters or so, but it's not critical. So that's kind of what it is. It's very thin though, so the only thing that I could think that might work better to actually clean that tube out would be something like a piece of string or a piece of yarn might work well. Yarn would probably work pretty well. So you could probably feed it onto a needle and like put it through, just like, you know, thread it through the thing, and then just kind of work it back and forth, like wet the yarn or whatever, and then work the tube back and forth. That would probably work pretty well, I would think. But that's about the only thing that I can really think to do it. You can always soak the yarn with like a, you know, dish soap or something like that if you needed to, like, you know, jazz up your cleaning routine a little bit. But that's kind of neat. Leslie H on Facebook, I'm curious about the Edison gold nib. Is it hard like the Platinum or softer like a Pilot Custom 74? And you asked me for a demo, and I'm afraid I will not be able to do that. I do not have an Edison gold nib handy. I have some on the shelf, but not many of them. We don't really sell a lot of them. It's expensive. It's $125 for that gold, just the gold nib. It's just very expensive, and we, you know, that's not a huge markup or anything. We actually don't have much of a markup at all on those nibs. Just they're just very expensive nibs. So. They are very soft though, so it's funny because Brian Gray actually wrote a number of years ago an article about, you know, IPG nibs and what is gold versus steel and how important is that really, essentially saying like gold nibs in and of themselves are not all that much better than stainless steel nibs. It's not like you have to have a gold nib to have it write well. And that's really kind of true. There are some things that gold nibs get you, and one of them is softness, you know, and that's, you know, kind of that springy kind of soft feel, and you definitely get that with the Edison gold nibs. So it's kind of like if you're buying, if you like into golf clubs or, you know, golfing or into golf clubs, if you're a golfer and you want really nice clubs, unless you're a really good golfer, you're not going to notice a difference between pretty good clubs in really good clubs, or like I'm a cyclist, right? I ride my bike a lot. The difference between a $1,500 bike and a $10,000 bike, most people wouldn't really benefit that much from the difference, because the differences become very subtle and only matter to a highly trained professional, if you will. So unless you have a lot of experience with fountain pens and you really can tell the fine differences in the way pens write, spending $125 on a gold nib is not going to be worth it for you. I'll just flat out say that right now. But if you have a lot of experience with them, you've really got a bunch of pens, and you can really appreciate the difference that you're going to get with a gold nib versus a steel nib, then it might be worth it to you. So I would say that if you're at that point, then it is something that you could consider. It's going to write more like, I would say, a custom 74 than it would a platinum. Platinum, even though they have 14, 18 karat nibs, they're very stiff in general. Pilot's nibs tend to be much softer. That's just kind of an observation I have from using them a bunch. So if you like kind of the way that the Pilot ones write more, the Edisons will write more like that. However, I will say the Edison nibs are very broad and they are incredibly wet, the gold ones. They're very wet. Look at the nib nook and you can tell how wet those things are. Compare the Edison steels to the Edison gold, it's almost like a whole nib size up, even with the same size designation, because of how wet those pens are. And because they are kind of soft, if you write with any kind of pressure, like I do, it's going to write very wet. So just be aware of that. I would tend to go very, very conservative on the nib size in terms of sizing it down if you are looking for one of those gold nibs. Cool. Whitney B on Facebook, should my Noodler's Dragon's Napalm, I'm surprised I did not just screw up saying that. The Noodler's Dragon's Napalm have metallic looking chunks in it. Will they hurt my pen? I know exactly what you're talking about. That has it, as does Georgia Peach has that in most of the time. I've asked Nathan about this. I've had several conversations about what it is, what's causing it, will it hurt the pen, and so on. What it is, it's actually a chemical reaction. It's called chemical sedimentation. And it has to do with the different dyes that react in that ink and the way that they bond to each other at like a chemical molecular level, whatever. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. But the way that they bond, and then there's so much of that dye in there, it kind of bonds and then settles out down into the bottom, and it kind of creates almost what looks like glitter inside just those particular inks. It ends up looking like glitter. There's other forms of chemical sedimentation. Diamond Pumpkin has a lot of that. Jeroboam Rouge Hematite. Jeroboam Stormy Gray is a perfect example of some of that sedimentation that can fall out. Sometimes it's because of pigmentation or other things like that. I don't know. I'm kind of speculating now at this point because I don't have that kind of insight into the chemical makeup of these inks. It's secret even from me. So specifically the Dragon's Napalm, though, has almost like this glittery type chemical sedimentation that settles out. I've been told by Nathan that it is not harmful to your pen, that it will, break down with water and stuff like that, just like normal. So if you want to, you could like run that ink through a coffee filter and get that junk out of there and then pour it back in the bottle. That is definitely one thing you could do if you don't like that being in there. But if you do, I would be careful with that because you gotta pour very slowly. I've had some interesting fails trying to filter ink through a coffee filter because I poured it too fast. It takes a little while to trickle through there. But anyway, so that's one thing that you could try, or like a nylon pantyhose or something would also work too, probably. So that's something that you could look out for. But honestly, Nathan said that you don't really need to get that stuff out of there. You just let it settle to the bottom, fill your pen like normal, and then just toss it when it gets down to the very bottom, and that's all you need to worry about. So it really shouldn't cause any problem. If it really freaks you out, do the filter thing, and that should get that out of there. But that's kind of what it is. And Dragon's Napalm too, I didn't even realize this. It takes at least 6 months for Nathan to actually make that ink. Just the way that the dyes have to react and stuff, it takes about 6 months. So whatever you're using has been at least 6 months after he's mixed it or whatever. So that might have something to do with how long it takes. I had no idea how long it takes Nathan to make some of these inks. That's why supply can kind of run out here and there. Part of it might be, issues with supply chain and stuff, but also it's just how long it takes to make. Which that actually leads me really well into the next question, which I intentionally placed here. Cathy F on Facebook asked, Diatramentus has a new color in the document line, fog gray. Will you be stocking it anytime soon? This is also a good example. There's definitely some parallels between Noodlers and Diatramentus, mainly just that it's one guy that makes all this stuff. So the guy that makes Diatramentus is Dr. Jansen in Germany. He does not speak English, so we actually have to have all of our emails translated through his daughter, who does speak English and German. So it is interesting trying to do correspondence. It's usually never lightning fast. And the stuff that he makes is on demand. So pretty much when we place an order for any Diatramentus ink, he gets the order, makes the ink, and then ships it out to us. So in the earlier days, it would take, 6 weeks to 2 months. And then as we have, gotten the Diatramentus inks have gotten more popular, it's still one guy making it. So now when we place our orders, the larger the order we place, the longer it takes him to make it and ship it out to us. And I think with these document inks too, there's probably, this is where the good segue is coming in, there's probably, I don't know this for a fact, but there's probably a bit of kind of chemical reaction that needs to occur with these permanent inks. It's not like you just like mix them together and it's like, okay, it's good to ship. There's probably a good bit of reaction or some kind of like cooking or whatever. I don't know. It's a mystery to me how these things are actually made, but I know that there are some inks that are made out there that need to be like heated when they're mixed and so on. There's a lot of different factors for how ink is actually made, but these document inks have been taking longer to come in. It's been like a 3-month to 4-month lag time for us to get these in at all. So what happened is we discovered these inks, last summer, and we started to get some interest in them, and we're like, okay, it's a new ink, it's permanent, okay, that's kind of neat. Let's go ahead, we'll order some, we'll get it in, and then kind of figure it out more. And what happened was these inks really started to pick up steam on the internet worldwide, thanks to some artists and stuff who've been playing with them and really talking them up. So what happened is by the time we got our first shipment in several months after we kind of initially found out about the inks, there was already more demand than we could meet. And so it was like, oh gosh, okay, so it sold out like immediately. And so we're like, okay, great. And then they came out with a yellow one, and they were expanding the line. Now they got fog gray. So they've been expanding the line. We've had this huge lag time, but the lag time hasn't matched up with the demand that we've been seeing. So the demand has been coming up, and then once we finally get the order in, the stuff sells immediately because we're basing it off of 4 months ago of demand. So then we went ahead and placed another order over what the demand was at that time, and since then demand has gone up even more. So which is great, a great problem to have, but it's still a problem because we're not able to get enough. And so like what we've done is we've ordered just a ton. Like we've ordered a ton of document inks now, but because it's still one guy making it, it's gonna take that much longer to come in. So it's kind of like, a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like, in terms of a business sense, scarcity creates demand. This ink is truly scarce because we can't get it, and then the fact that we can't get it creates that much more of a frenzy when it does come in. So we're having a really hard time gauging what kind of demand there even really is for this ink. And so we're trying to order it, but the quantities that we're ordering is just like, really? Are people really gonna want this much of this ink? But that's what's been happening. So we keep on ordering up, but it takes a while to come in, so it's gonna be a stutter step kind of thing. So to answer your specific question about fog gray, I literally found out about fog gray when you asked this question. So I have done a little bit of research and we'll do a little bit more. I'm sure we're going to carry it because there's demand for these document inks, but even still, it's going to take several months for us to get it in. So I'm going to have to be strategic about how much we actually want to order. And so that's something to take into consideration because these are coming direct from Germany. So it's got to go through customs and all this stuff. It just takes longer than it would just a normal, something that we would get through like a US distributor. That kind of thing would take a couple days, maybe a week. But these take, months to be made and then to actually get shipped. So I am sorry about that. I know it's been a frustrating situation for a lot of you with these document inks, and my heart goes out to you. It really does. I'm dying too because it's almost outside of my control as much as yours. But that hopefully just helps you get a little bit of understanding as to what goes on behind the scenes. Cathy F. Oh no. I just answered your question, Cathy. I was going to answer it again. No. Moving on. Elijah S. on Facebook said, any plans for Goulet nibs in a smaller size than number 6? I love the Goulet nibs, but I also have a lot of pens that won't take a number 6. The only other ones that I could easily get would be number 5 size, because Yovo already has those at the ready. We already have a relationship with them. The minimum quantities are pretty high, so you know, it's not the kind of thing I could just like add a few on while I'm going ahead and ordering the number 6s. It's pretty substantial, and you know, I just don't know what kind of demand there is for number 5 size nibs. We already have Edison number 5 nibs, which, you know, they're about $20 a piece. It comes with the housing and everything, which you don't really need in your situation. You know, they're really made for swapping on to Edison pens, like the Perlette, and the smaller like Mina and stuff like that we don't carry. But the number 5 size is used on several other pens. It's used on the TWSBI 580, which also has its own nibs already. It's used on the Monteverde tool pen, the Artista Crystal, the Paquito. It's used on several other pens out there. So there is some demand for it, but there are certainly fewer pens that we carry that have a number 5 size nib than there are that have a number 6 size. So right there, that makes it hard for me to be like, yeah, this is a slam dunk winner, especially because, you know, the big catalyst for us to carry the number 6 size was that, you know, we got kind of the blessing from Nathan Tardif to say, yeah, go ahead, promote it on my Noodler's pens, you know, go for it. I want people to use my nibs, or I want people to use other nibs in my pens. That's kind of the reason I make them with these ebonite feeds and stuff, so it can be heat set, used with other nibs. That's kind of his thing. When you get into swapping brands with other nibs with plastic feeds and stuff like that, it becomes a little bit more hit or miss as to how well it's actually going to work. In general, if it's number 5, it should work pretty well, but then it gets into a situation where if it doesn't work well, who do you blame? The pen or the nib? The companies are going to point fingers at each other and say, you know, we're not going to warranty you're using our nib on somebody else's pen, or so on and so forth. Now, it's a little different because if we're supplying the nib, you know, it just gets kind of touchy. Like, how do you do that? So it's been something I've been a little gun shy about doing number 5s. Also, I'm just not as much of a fan of the number 5 nibs from Yovo as I am with the number 6. They're still good quality, but not quite as good as the number 6, I don't feel. I feel they're a little bit scratchier, and I'm not a big fan of the number 5 italics. Definitely not as consistent as the number 6 italics. So that means we'd have to do a lot more kind of handwork and tweaking and stuff like that. So again, it's kind of like pebbles in the backpack, you know, just kind of reasons like, I don't really know if this would be the right thing for us. So that's why we haven't done it yet. It may be over time we decide like, yeah, okay, just it's worth the trouble. We'll go ahead and do it. But for right now, it's just not worth it. And as far as other nib sizes go, you're kind of on your own. I don't have easy access to those ones. I'd have to really hunt around, and it would still be in kind of the same situation, be getting to even more obscure nib sizes with high quantities and stuff. It's just really tough for me to do. All right, William S. on Facebook said, do fountain pens work for multi-part non-carbon copy forms? I'd love to use a fountain pen at work, but from what I recall, they don't do so well in the multi-part form field. That's definitely true. This is one of those things I've mentioned in previous Q&As that I am really sold on fountain pens, love them to death, but I believe that fountain pens are a tool. And just like any tool, it's going to have its pros and its cons. It's going to have its limitations. You know, I'm a woodworker. I love the table saw. There's a lot you can do with a table saw, but if you're trying to cut a piece of wood that's this big, doing it on a table saw is probably not the best thing. It's a tool. It performs a job. Same thing with fountain pens. I believe that carbon copy or multi-part forms in this way, you can definitely do it with a fountain pen, but you start to run into some issues, some potential issues. So for me, that's where I say, all right, I'm switching to a roller ball. Like I don't prefer to use a roller ball. It's not a general thing, but I'm really not going for a writing experience when I'm writing on a multi-part form. It's a tool that's accomplishing a job. And if the fountain pen is not the best tool for that job, I will switch the tool and it's okay. You know, and some of you may think that's blasphemy, but that's just, you know, that's the approach I take. I use fountain pens for 99% of my life's writing. You know, but there are certain situations where it's just not as ideal. And that's kind of where I stand with that. So in general, what you will want is a fountain pen with a very stiff nib, something like a Lamy stainless steel or a Pilot Metropolitan, something like that where the nib is pretty stiff, pretty smooth, and you can write and with a good amount of pressure. That writes pretty well in more of an upright position. All right, so battery's about to die, so I'm not going to get to the rest of them. I got 12 questions out, so that's not too bad. Definitely talked a lot on this one, so Hope you enjoyed my floating around answering random stuff. I do have a question of the week for you this week. This is kind of stemming off of the question here earlier where let's see here, Kenneth was talking about how he uses these videos in his kind of pen cleaning ritual. So I'm just curious to know, what is your Goulet Q&A watching ritual? Or what do you have it? Do you watch it kind of randomly, and that's okay? I'd just love to know if you could post in the comments just what do you do? What's your routine for sitting down and watching an hour-long Goulet Q&A? Because I realize it's quite a commitment, and I'm just curious as to how you work me into your life. So love to hear that. You can ask any questions for future Q&As in the comments on Facebook, whatever you want, and I'd be happy to help however I can. I hope you have a fantastic weekend, the great rest of your week. Have fun with all your pens, and write on.